particular term. We hope she's going to have a very long tenure past that. And it's with great pride that we've got her as our chair of the board. And Ann Wheeler, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brickley. That was a really nice introduction. I haven't heard nice things like that for a while. It just kind of, that was a really nice introduction. And, you know, and I do tie the future of our county to some of the economic development, and that's not really applicable for this conversation, but really how do we promote Prince William County as number one in the region, and I think that's possible. So, you know, with that said, good morning. I know I have 10 minutes. I'm actually going to start a timer just to make sure I don't start waxing too long. And I am really honored to be here. You know, as I know you guys are working collectively to make the greater Prince William area more connected, you know, within itself, as well as our neighboring localities. This time last year, the newly elected Prince William Board of County Supervisors, you know, we gathered in the board chambers for our organizational meeting, and I gave last year's State of the County address. During that annual address, I outlined a few of the board's priorities for the year. You know, I committed to providing a change in tenor and also ensuring that all board decisions took equity into consideration, you know, with the hope of producing real racial and social economic justice, and making sure that there was real access to transportation, parks and recreation, education, and economic opportunities for everyone in Prince William County. You know, while our community has been plagued by the global pandemic for the past 10 months, instead of going forward with some of the things that we had lined up, you know, I want you to know that our local governments continue to serve the community and is hopefully a beacon of light during what has been a dark time. We've worked real hard to manage and mitigate the impact of the coronavirus on our community. And now, of course, we're going into vaccinations, and we'll work diligently on that also. You know, but in the midst of everything that happened last year, you know, we made time to move our county forward in a lot of different ways. And so I'm just going to touch on a few of those, just meant to be more pertinent to the group today. You know, first of all, worked on long before I got there, but you know, we established the Parks and Recreational Master Plan, and we saw our Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Department become accredited. You know, that was joining only 12 other Virginia agencies and only 1% of parks and recreation agencies nationwide. And I think that was a real achievement. You know, we opened a state-of-the-art compost facility, you know, which extended the life of our landfill by more than 10 years. You know, and we'll have a positive impact on our environment, as over in about 10 months, I'll just, maybe people didn't catch this, but we require people to separate out their lawn and leaf, I was gonna say droppings, but their lawn and leaf trash to be brought to the compost yard. And that was a change that we made over the last couple of months that goes into effect in 10 months. You know, we adopted the county's first climate resolution, really focusing on energy and some of the electrification of our county. You know, and that was really to address the ever worsening threat that climate change establishes to us and protect our community for future generations. We are establishing a county equity lens, which will apply to every county decision with the advent of the addition of a equity officer. And last, you know, we did make progress. We secured hundreds of millions of dollars in various funding sources for regional transportation options near the county gateways. We moved forward a solution for Route 28, and we received state funding finally to study the extension of the Blue Line to Prince William County, the Prince William County East End, just to name a few. So last week, I provided this year's State of the County address. You know, that was redefining the mission and vision for the county going forward. And that was going to take more than a year, mainly because over this next year, we're going to work to complete our strategic plan, as well as our comprehensive land use, mobility, and transportation plan for the entire county. So that's something that we'll be embracing this coming year. You know, we are dealing with sort of an ever-changing situation with COVID-19 and people staying home. And so we're trying to really take the long view and vision for those things, knowing that some of our short-term effects will actually change and go back to where they were before the pandemic. You know, as chair of the county, I continuously work to foster a sense of community among the residents. And I'm committed to really working on interconnecting the county through trails and greenways, you know, such as the Bull Run Aquapond Trail, the Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trail, and the East Coast Greenway. this is how I really believe we can build a stronger community here. And I thought a lot about that. So I'm grateful to be here today. In 2019, the Napsco Creek Boardwalk opened up in the county, which is such a jewel. And I know it's part of the Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trail. Yeah, and I think that really showed the county's commitment to connectivity between neighborhoods and between nature and history, which I think is really important. I know this beautiful trail connects Ripon Lodge and the Lee Sylvania State Park and is hugely, hugely appreciated from everyone for the scenery and accessibility. So I know everybody here and so many people were really instrumental on that. And thank you so much. There's continued interest among trails among our residents, and that's why the county is currently working on the Mid-Billy chapter in the comprehensive plan, as I mentioned. And that chapter was removed from the park recreations plan, but it's going to consist of a team that's well versed in alternative transportation issues and connect our county through an equity lens and working to connect those trails throughout the county. So I will say that trails and greenways are highly desired as a recreational amenity in every state, local, and national opinion survey. With the unmatched landscape in Prince William County has in this metropolitan area, a system of connected trails and greenway systems can really raise our quality of life nationally. And so with that, I want to say that I really believe that we can be number one in the region with regards to some of these things if we have some vision and we think in a forward manner. For this reason, I do support, I love the idea of an aspirational trails and greenway plan. So I'm excited to see that today, making sure that we have connectivity from the Potomac River all the way to the Bull Run Mountains, and also ones that connect us with other jurisdictions in the metropolitan region. So, wondering how those trails can have an impact, I really believe that they have an economic and health benefit impact from our county. And I think that's one of the things we've really learned during the pandemic, that there is a real need for an outdoor system where people can go and be healthy. I know during this pandemic, my husband and I, and when our daughters were home visiting during this time, really made a point of going out and finding some of those trail systems. One of those we've always gone to is the Bull Run Mountain regional area, but the other one was Leopold's Preserve, a 400-acre preserve right nearby, where we learned we could take the dog and have a great time. And that really enhanced our quality of life over the last 10 months. And so I'm grateful for the people who had the vision to put those in place. I will mention that, we did have a bond referendum in 2019, and in that bond referendum was money for parks and trails. And that means that at this point in time, if we're willing to commit to it and advocate for it, we can actually move some of those ideas forward because we have the way financially on how to do it. And that's always sort of been an issue of how do we move that forward financially. And we now have those bonds if we want to issue them in place. And so I encourage everybody to advocate for putting those, using those bonds and using them wisely. I look forward to working with the people on this call. And so for a moment, I just want to touch and sort of go back to discuss a recent approval of the preserve at Long Branch. I realize it was a contentious for so many. And I want to talk about what I saw in that project just for a moment. Putting aside what appeared to be somewhat of a political agenda, or even sometimes a personal vendetta, which I don't understand. I looked at that project juxtaposed of taking those 300 plus acres and chopping it into 30 10-acre parcels. What I saw, as opposed to doing that, is what I saw was access to 190 acres for all county residents. I saw access to a trail system, 2.5-mile trail system that connected the Doves Landing Park that we're just really beginning to realize to eastern area neighborhoods. I saw the preservation of a historic area that probably would have fallen by the wayside and just been sold if it hadn't been for that project. And lastly, I saw water access. When I listened to my own appointee to the Trails and Blueways Commission, She mentioned that one of the key things that we need throughout the county, which I didn't realize we have, and I need to get smarter on, is access to water. We have a lot of access. We have a lot of water around us, but we don't have a lot of public access to that water. And how do we enhance that? And so that's really, what I saw at the Preserve of Long Branch, and I guess we'll see what happens with that going forward. Lastly, I'll say that I ran on integrity, inclusivity, and vision when I got elected to office. And for me, the integrity as a part is not making everything personal and stooping to a level of personal attacks, and really trying to lift up the conversation from a better viewpoint. The inclusivity for me is making sure that everyone across the county has access to all the county areas and all the benefits that we have in this wonderful place. And making sure that we don't have an East and a West End County, that we have a single Prince William County that we all enjoy. And last was vision. I'll start off with the vision. One of the things I talk about for vision was Prince William Forest. I was horrified when we went a few years ago to the Prince William Forest with our smaller children and could only get there off of 95. I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard of. And so one of the things when I was running for office was I talked about getting access off of 234 to the Prince William Forest. I've since learned, I understand there are a couple of reasons why the park didn't have access off of 234. Some of them are historical, and some of them are fears about cut-through traffic. I think those can both be addressed. And what I've learned over the last 6 months is that there are people in better position than me to advocate for access off of 234 to the Prince William Forest. There are people working on it. There are people talking about it. I really believe it's going to come to fruition. But I want to say, if there's anyone on this call who's ever working on that and you need any support from the county whatsoever, please let me know, because that is one of my goals, is to get access to the Prince William Forest off of 234, because I think that's a game changer for Prince William County. I just think that would really sort of change so much about it's such a wonderful place, and have easy access off of 234 would benefit all county residents. And last, I'm going to do a brief touch on the rural area. I think we need to begin that discussion now on how we preserve our rural area and our lands. I talked often and was very frank that I don't think chopping our rural area into 10-acre lots is a way to preserve it. We've seen 15,000 acres over the last 10, 15 years go to 10-acre lots. And I don't believe that preserved anything. I sometimes think, I close my eyes and I think, imagine if we just saved 30% of that for open space, just 30% of it, and if someone had the vision to structure that differently, we would all have better access to really enjoying that view set. And the idea of the buy right, 1,500 homes buy right, that's $50 to $100 million in lost profits, but that's too late to really recoup. And so what I'm looking forward, and we're going to start the conversation now, is how do we really preserve that land before we see some of our, there aren't that many large parcels left, just fall and be chopped up into 10-acre lots. And so I look forward on having that conversation. And I will end with, it came out of a conversation with someone from Ducks Unlimited. And if you know Ducks Unlimited, it was really about gun rights. but the person from Ducks Unlimited was talking about how Ducks Unlimited got started. And it talked about preserving the thoroughfares for wildlife and duck hunting, because those thoroughfares were so important to wildlife and keeping those populations going. And I'm sure maybe people know that Ducks Unlimited has had a huge impact nationwide on our conservation network and our lands in many, many ways. And I'm really grateful for that. And I understand the idea of gun rights, because I came from New Jersey. Gun rights were all about hunting. And so I can completely understand how those are tied together. And I realize that in some ways, what you all are doing today and trying to make the interconnectivity are the same things that our wildlife care about. They care about having those thoroughfares and preservation, and so we can walk from one place to another without being stopped by some arbitrary barrier. And I sort of see the same idea of your trails and blueways connectivity as the preservation of those wildlife thoroughfares. I mean, we are technically still wildlife, and I really respect that you're actually addressing a human need to be able to progress from one place to another unheeded. And that's really how I see what you're doing today. So I'm grateful to be here. I probably talked too long, but that's all right. I left a few moments for questions, and I would love to address that if you have any. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I know we've got one that Eileen has prepared. So let me unmute Eileen Sheridan.
Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yep.
It looked much better when it was written down, so now I didn't realize I was going to have to utter it. But essentially my point is, so I'm the coalition representative for the Trails and Blueways Council. And as you know, the Trails and Blueways Council had a resolution that we provided to the Board of County Supervisors regarding a desire to take action on staffing, additional staffing for Parks and Rec to be ready for the bond funds that you referenced in your discussion. So I had two parts to the question. One is the board taking action on issuing the bonds, moving forward with that, just because we haven't heard anything. We don't know what's going on with that. And two, are you planning to take action on our desire to address increased staffing in Parks and Rec, just because, you know, they've been the redheaded stepchild for a long time in terms of trails.
Well, and so two things, you know, I think the last year, the pandemic really put a financial crimp in a lot of people's plans, mainly because of the uncertainty. You know, we cut back the budget by $40 million. We didn't know it was going to really what was going to happen. And I will say that some of the things we thought were going to happen didn't happen, and our revenues didn't go down drastically. And so we're in a financial way, we were a lot better off because we cut our expenses and had revenue. And some of that has gone to the pandemic. And so I think we're now just sort of coming out of that and talking about how do we use some of the bonds, either roads or parks and blueways, trails and blueways going forward. And so I think that's definitely on the discussion going forward in the next budget cycle. And we're just about to start that. In terms of being an advocate for an additional position, I will sort of put that on my list of things to do. I don't know, I'll have to go back and look. I'll say sometimes when we get a slew of 500 emails on something, other emails get sort of lost in the noise. And so I will go back and make a commitment to looking at that and perhaps advocating for that. You know, I love to advocate for Parks and Rec and spending and new positions. And when the county exec always cringes when he sees me coming, but that's okay. That's what I'm here for. So I will put that on my list of things to look at and possibly advocate for, but thank you. You're muted.
Thanks. And since the bond vote specifically identified trails, you know, we're just eager to see that move forward.
And I will say to everyone on this call, when we get to budget time, it's important to advocate for greater spending in the areas you want. So we have support for a robust budget that addresses community needs. And I will just leave that at that.
You can't ask for much better than for the chair of the board to invite us to come in and advocate for trails in the budget process.
Yeah, why not, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. Didn't all chairs do that? I guess not.
Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to take questions. If we get any in the chat subsequent to this, we'll forward them on to you for a reply. At this point, I'm going to keep us moving along because we only ask people to participate for an hour. Our next speaker is going to address the aspirational trails map, and that'll be Moses Chun working with Robert Boyd.
All right, I'm going to try to share my screen here to make sure you all can see what I see. And I think that should do it. Do I have a thumbs up on whether y'all can see the slide? Great. Hi, everyone. I'll just quickly introduce myself if we haven't met already. My name is Moses Chun. I work with the National Park Service Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. And our program has been working with the coalition on a number of things. And largely this year, we want to focus on strengthening the coalition's organizational capacity, and on top of that, forming this aspirational trails map. And what I want to do today in talking about this Trails map is explain the process of how we might move forward on how this map will be produced. Hopefully this will help us have those conversations and figure out how each of you might contribute to the formation of this map. So first I'll say that the map's intent, or what this map is aiming to do, is it is a representation of your priorities, your aspirations, and in a lot of ways I've talked about it as a wish list of sorts. A wish list that represents the body of this coalition, which is very diverse in the kinds of partners that are here, and your interests span widely. And even though the vision and mission of what you are trying to do is consistent, we want to make sure that the map that we produce is consistent with that charter. And I'll show the vision and mission here in just a second. And I want to kind of separate this, or at least draw a line to clarify that whereas a user-centric map around recreation shows how anyone in the community might try to find opportunities to either recreate or get somewhere, or see what's on a map for their own use purposes, this map, more focused, in a more focused way, tries to communicate, where does the coalition advocacy direct to? What does the coalition want to support? And it tries to communicate that clearly between, who wants to see what happen, where are the highest priorities, and realistically, what is the time frame that we might see these happen? So we want to embark on this process of making sure that we're enumerating the priorities that you all have stated in the past. We want to collect new ones, and I'll just show what that process is going to look like in just a second. But I'll just kind of put this slide up here just to remind you all that this is the vision and mission. This is our highest level priority of what we're all here to do. Providing equitable access to transportation, recreation, cultural, educational, and economic opportunities for all. And with that in mind, I'm going to move on to this process. I see 4 primary stages. These aren't particularly sequential, but different components of what we might see in this process of producing an aspirational trails map. Firstly, it's to identify the aspirations that you all have articulated before. There were sessions in 2018 and 19 led by Ann O'Neill, who is here today. I think she's here somewhere, where we all sat around some maps and flip charts to write out, hey, these are the things that we really want to see in terms of that interconnected network of trails within the county area. We want to make sure that we capture those, and also have an opportunity to recognize that in the last 2 years, heck, even the last year, the world has greatly changed, and perhaps those priorities have shifted as well. And the perspective that we're bringing the work of this coalition to Trails might have shifted. And we want to make sure we have some specific conversations along the way, reflecting that shift, or maybe even doubling down on, hey, we find these priorities and aspirations to be just as much or even more important than when we mentioned it, maybe even just a year or 2 ago. And so we want to do both, articulate those priorities as they were in the past, and then collect new ones that you have had emerging from the body of this coalition. The Trails Coalition will also embark on prioritizing it. We can probably come up with a list of 300, 400, maybe even 500 different trails suggestions and priorities that we might want to see in the area. But as a communication tool, we want to be more focused and prioritize what is really most important, and where could we direct our time instead of spreading it out too much. Where are the specific baskets of projects or priorities that might maximize the impact in making sure action happens in terms of making these trail aspirations realized. So the Trail Coalition will need to discuss a process for how to prioritize and the time span that this trails map is going to represent, establish some sort of process for updating them as these projects get completed, and how to review new priorities to be communicated on a map. So those are all things that we want to also facilitate. And lastly is the mapping component. RTCA, our program, was looking at trying to provide some of our own mapping experience to making this happen, but we realized that perhaps we need something a little more robust, and the Park Service is pursuing an agreement with the Center for Community GIS, which is a professional organization that serves communities in geography, to secure their professional services to producing this first run of a aspirational trails map. So myself and the Park Service will be focusing on trying to collect a lot of these aspirations, taking those ideas from big picture to detail into words and concepts that can be mapped and put on something that can be visually representing the community's desires in a clear and focused way, and that this can be a back pocket tool for all of us in being advocates and supporters of an interconnected network of trails. Let's see, what did I miss? So in order to do so, in the next 3 months, we're wanting to produce an aspirational trails map for the next April 15th meeting that might be adopted and reviewed by the coalition. And we'll do our best to make sure that we can meet that deadline. But in the meantime, we need engagement from the coalition to work on some of the nitty-gritty details, to iron out those big projects and concepts into actionable priorities and aspirations that that move on every level of specificity, and have clarity that we've thought through these projects, where when somebody shows up with, hey, have we considered something, and we realize, oh wow, this project is no longer feasible. Instead of reaching that point too late in the game, we want to make sure that we have those conversations early, and that those priorities are articulated in a manner that is consistent with each other, so that they don't impede progress on any front. So we're going to aim to, in the next 2 months, embark on that process. And we want to do this through standing up working groups or working committees that we're looking to erect for making these articulations of priorities and aspirations. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And so when we stand up these committees, we want to have, because we need to feed a lot of this information to another professional organization that's going to be producing the map for us, we need to speak in their language. We need to take those ideas from our minds and from our words to something that is clear and effectively communicated for a geographer. And so we want to understand where are these focus areas, and how do we want to organize our thoughts, and the end product. Do we want an interactive web map? Do we need printed specific call outs for different places? Let's be specific, and it may be yes and to all, but to have some details about what we're really expecting, and that we have examples along the way, so that this is an iterative process that hones in on specifically what is most helpful for you, rather than what I myself, our GIS specialists, or anyone on the steering committee ourselves are trying to produce. Again, this is about it being consistent and useful for everybody here. And with that, I might even ask Robert to hop in and add to any points that I might have neglected to mention.
Sure. Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. This map is going to be a process to create something that's usable and useful for the coalition. We can throw everything on the map, but until we have it all prioritized and really synthesized down, it's not going to be all that useful. So I think that these working groups and the time that we'll spend together to refine and really sharpen our goals are going to be really useful. And I think that once we're done with that, we'll have a concise message that can be presented in any of the formats Moses was talking about, and really be useful going to political leaders, anyone that we need to go to advocate for trails in the county. And I think that it's going to be great when we're finished with it.
Great. And so I want to kind of answer maybe a question brewing is how might I help now and into the future? First is Robert shared a link in the chat very, very early on with the way to provide feedback for the Prince William County Mobility Chapter. We're collecting your thoughts and your perspectives, and through sharing that feedback, we're hoping to feed the process of building this aspirational trails map. So please take time to use that application, fill out the surveys. Robert, if you could add that to the chat one more time here at the bottom, that would be great. And in terms of dates, let's see, we're looking at holding a number of workshops. Number one, to go into more detail about what this process is going to look like if you'd like to participate deeper, and then talking about what these committee groups might look like. Charlie, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on what we see happening, this would be a great time. Thanks.
So February 4 is the first meeting of the Aspirational Trails Map Working Group. Those of you who want to build this map so that we have something to look at by April 15th, the process really kicks into gear on February 4th, where we identify how we're going to produce this product. So put in the chat if you're interested in participating in that particular group. We'll get you an invitation to the Zoom meeting on February 4th. 10 to noon is what we've tentatively scheduled. And at some point, we're going to come forward to the Board of County Supervisors with a list of our advocacy positions for us to invest in trails in Prince William County. This is how you get to play in that game.
Thanks, Charlie.
Charlie, can I add something too? Is that all right?
Please.
I also just building on what Charlie and Moses shared is that each of you in your own organizations, it's a real opportunity to think about the diversity within Prince William County, and also thinking about how you can speak for those residents as well. We know within the National Park Service, the history of our country, that certain populations were not given access to certain public lands. So it's also not only an opportunity to look at these trail connections, but to close gaps for communities who historically were not allowed access. And because they don't have access, it impacts their health, and they are socially vulnerable communities. So just wanting you to think about that. I know when I've hiked in Prince William County, I always see Korean Americans. So where are they in terms of your role reaching other people that don't look like us? So I just want to throw that out there.
Thanks, Anne. I think that was that's the core to what we should be doing is making sure that these networks of trails really do serve everybody in Prince William County and the larger area. So again, you'll be able to see a sort of starter map, how things are now in the link that Robert has provided. That might help you spur some ideas. And this aspirational trails map will be a tool for communicating the large level picture of and vision of what this coalition is advocating for, and then a lot of the specific projects that we all have passion toward, and bridging that gap and saying this is a way that we want to communicate in a unified way, in a way that is representative of not only this coalition but the community and what's in the best interest of the residents of Prince William County, that we're serving the, as we said, articulating the vision, serving the access to transportation, to recreation, to cultural, educational, economic opportunities. We want to consider all of those different perspectives, and we ask for each of your participation to make sure that we are reaching that wide level of perspectives, and that we're giving voice to those that may not have a voice here today, or may typically not have a voice during this process. So with that, I'll open it for questions, or
Actually, I'm going to move us along and questions in the chat, trying to keep to a schedule. We have another great speaker, and we're looking forward to hearing more from him. And here is our David Brickley. We'd like to do the introductions again, if you would.
Thanks, Charlie. If you look at that great picture, the guy in the white shirt, if he took his hat off, had hair back then. But the one on the left is our great mayor, Ernie Porta of the town of Occoquan. If there was a mayor in America who had walked the walk as well as talked the talk on trails and greenways and vision, it would be Ernie. Sarah from South Carolina, that's Ernie and I, God knows when. I was either in the General Assembly back then or led the Department of Conservation and Recreation in Virginia, but we put up the first East Coast Greenway sign in the town of Occoquan many, many years ago. Ernie just loves this stuff. He works on it. What a great partner. If we had mayors like that in every small town in America, it would just be a wonderful, wonderful thing. So it's just a great partnership. And so it's my pleasure to introduce the mayor of Occoquan, Ernie Porta.
Okay, Dave, thank you very, very much for that that generous and unexpected introduction. So I do really appreciate that. Never ceases to amaze me though when people put up photographs on Zoom. Honestly, folks, I really always think I'm better looking, and I see those photographs and have to become a little bit more humble when I see them. So. That was a really great introduction, Dave. You're a good guy, and I appreciate that. Charlie asked me if I could talk about two things in particular related to Occoquan and trails. Our new kayak canoe launch ramp under the Route 123 bridge, and then a little bit about our trail on the Tanyard Hill parcel that we have just outside of town on the corners of Old Bridge and Tanyard Hill roads. For those of you who don't know, in June, we opened in town a free public access canoe and kayak launch ramp in our parking lot underneath the Route 123 bridge that is suitable for people with ambulatory disabilities as well. You can also launch stand-up paddle boards there, which is candidly my thing. You just have to be a little bit more creative about how you use the launch. Prior to that, in the town of Occoquan, if you wanted to launch from there, you had to sort of scramble down rocks in some places underneath the bridge, probably trespass on somebody's property or go behind the Millhouse Museum, all of which wasn't convenient. It was one of the real shortcomings I felt in Occoquan, and in some sense a tragedy that you have a riverfront community that doesn't have any public access to the water. And I heard it mentioned earlier in the conversation that public access to trails and streams is really a thing that we all would like to concentrate on in Prince William County. So this was our effort to do this. It was a result of back in 2010, I submitted a grant to the state's recreational trails program for this. Back then, we really didn't have the staff to do those sort of grants. So I did it myself with support from some other organizations in the area, writing letters of support and that sort of thing. And in that context, I really need to give a compliment to the state's recreational trails program, particularly someone who's no longer there, Cynthia Waymack, because candidly, doing the grant application myself without geotech work in advance, which we obviously didn't want to pay for, meant that I dramatically underestimated the cost of the project. And once geotech work was done, and at least basic geotech investigation, it was clear that the project was going to cost a lot more than had originally been anticipated. Well, the state worked for roughly 8 to 10 years to help find that additional money because of how important and valuable they thought the project was. It is the only free public access ramp to the Occoquan River below the dam. You can access the river from Occoquan Regional Park across the river, but even if you bring your own kayak or canoe, you gotta pay a launch fee. And then of course there are private communities like Belmont Bay that are active on the water, but obviously you need to belong to those communities to be able to access it from there. So I was really proud of the fact that we ultimately got that done. We will have a formal ribbon cutting for it sometime in the spring. We opened it in June, but between COVID and then the winter months coming, we decided we would let it get used a little bit, and then we do a ribbon cutting in the spring. I do want to mention that both for this and the trail I'm going to talk about at Tanyard Hill Road, this is not just an amenity for residents, obviously. Obviously, we think it's valuable for residents. If you live in a riverfront town and you can't get access to the water, it's really a crime. So that was important that we have that amenity for our residents. We also consider it, though, to be an economic development tool, because this encourages people to come down. And candidly, some of you know the parking situation in Occoquan. If you want to get a spot on a nice weekend, you got to get down here early. So the folks who are coming down to kayak or canoe off that launch, they're going to come down early, 9, 10 o'clock. Otherwise, they're not going to find a parking spot in that lot, most likely. They come down early. If they're still there, if you see their canoes or kayaks on racks on top of their cars or in trailers or something like that, after 11 o'clock or noon, that means they're here shopping or eating. So we consider it both an amenity for residents as well as an economic development tool. Now, with regard to Tanyard Hill, some of you may remember that back in 2012, we sort of fought tooth and nail to try to prevent a 17-acre parcel on the corner of Old Bridge Road and Tanyard Hill from being developed. It wasn't going to be fully developed. Part of it was going to be put in a conservation easement, but we didn't want it developed at all. So we lost that rezoning challenge before the Board of Supervisors 5-3. But 2 years later, sort of fundamentally what we predicted would happen happened, which was the developer really wasn't able to develop that parcel. So they came back to us, the owner came back to us and said, are you still interested in the deal you proposed to us 2 years ago? Which was basically the town buying the 17 acres for $300,000 and putting it in a conservation easement, the entire thing. So that's what we did. And we had decided right from the get-go that we were going to make it passive recreation, put a trail on it that would then connect ultimately to what we hope ends up being this the trail from McCourt to the town of Occoquan. And we constructed our own natural surface trail on that parcel. It's about a half mile loop trail. We did it actually over, it took me and some friends to go out and flag it. And then we had some folks who know a little bit more about the best route for trails to come out and sort of check some of that route. And once we'd done that, though, we had a single work day in September with volunteers from town and volunteers from the Prince William Trails and Streams Coalition, and put that trail in place, and people have been using it. It's also relatively recently was blazed. Now it's a little bit overblazed because I did the blazing. I tried to follow, the rules and advice that professionals had given about blazing. I give myself a B probably on that. So those of you who are trail experts might find it to be a little bit overblazed, but I think it's a great trail. It's short, but it has elevation changes. It has it has some fair weather stream crossings. It has actually a lot of nice sort of what I would characterize as ecological features that over time we're going to highlight in different ways, probably with some markers. So ultimately, we would like this trail to, because it's outside of the town boundaries, we would like this trail to connect to the trail that's going between the McCourt building and Occoquan. I should mention too, before I wrap up, because I know you've got some time constraints here, that we actually just recently at a town council meeting established as one of our budget priorities for fiscal year 2022, the maintenance and promotion of Occoquan as a trail junction. And this is something that actually Dave Brickley made me think about years ago when we were putting up those East Coast Greenway signs, because Occoquan actually is a de facto trail junction right now. The East Coast Greenway comes through, US Bike Route 1 comes through. That's also something actually Dave Brickley helped with. A portion of the Potomac National Scenic Heritage Trail comes through. The Occoquan Water Trail comes through. We're right across the river from Fairfax's Cross County Trail, which I believe now is formerly called the Jerry Conley Trail. Once this trail is established finished between the McCourt building and Occoquan, that will be the one non-water western entrance into town, trail entrance into town. So that will make the town a trail junction from all 4 points of the main points of the compass. And one of the things I'd ultimately like to see in Virginia, and I think I will be talking to state legislators in the next session about this, is I'm from Pennsylvania. Some of you might know Pennsylvania has a trail town designation. If you've ever been to Great Allegheny Passage or any of those, towns can be designated trail towns by having certain features, and it's an additional promotional thing. I'd sort of like to see something like that in Virginia, and I think Occoquan actually is a good test case, because we or a good what do you call them, exemplar, because of all these trails we have coming through town. So we've established that as a budget priority for next year in the town of Occoquan. Trails are extremely important, I think, both for both for economic development purposes, and quite frankly, given the experience we've had with the pandemic, you can see how the need for people to have a safe outlet outdoors for exercise, recreation, etc., can be extremely important, more important than it might be in normal circumstances. So I think it's a key thing. I appreciate that there are a lot of people out there focusing on it. I will put one plug in, and this is not meant to be a criticism of the Parks and Rec, because I think they do a great job. They're very dedicated. I did get hit up by some people from LRPRA the other day expressing, saying they were discouraged because apparently there was recently a presentation that indicated that some portions of this McCourt to Occoquan Trail, some existing portions were going to be renovated or refurbished, as opposed to the effort being spent on finishing some of the gaps that will connect from McCourt to Occoquan. And it's a cliche, but I use it quite frequently because I actually believe it. I am a firm believer in not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I really feel that when it comes to trails, the sooner you can get something in place and get people on it and using it, they see the benefit, they start becoming advocates for it, they advocate for resources to be devoted to it, and it can really have a nice snowball effect. I'm sure there are good reasons for going back and refurbishing as opposed to finishing the gaps. But generally speaking, I'd like to encourage those of you who are trail advocates and water access advocates, I'd like to encourage you to, try not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Try to get things in place that are reasonable as quickly as you can, and people will become advocates for the improvements that will enhance them over time. So let me stop there. Thanks, Charlie, for inviting me to this. Again, Dave, thanks for the nice introduction.
Thank you very much. We're going to spare you the questions moment because of the time constraints we're working under. But if people have questions for Ernie, post them in the chat. We'll share them with him. He'll get back to you. Alita Daniels, are you with us? We had anticipated you speaking in the next segment.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Excellent. Alita's going to talk to us about the committees we want to create beyond this aspirational trails group.
Can you, do I have sharing capabilities?
Yes, you should.
Okay, cool. Let me share my screen real quick. All right, So we have a list of potential committees and the tasks that would be assigned to each committee. We did talk about this a while ago now. I can't even remember how long ago. We talked about creating these committees. And so some of these have, you'll notice some names under them. These are certainly not set in stone, but if your name is under here, it was because you had expressed interest a while ago when we spoke about these. But so briefly to go through this, we've got the steering committee that's going to coordinate activities and to prioritize the tasks for each committee, and then their work groups, organizing the quarterly meetings, the speakers and the agendas, seeking grants and technical support, representing the coalition in discussions with other non-governmental organizations and businesses, developing and maintaining the charter, bylaws, strategic plan, policies and procedures, coordinating the roles, responsibilities, and schedules of each committee and task force and work group, and then also establishing and implementing the work plan with the National Park Service. And I'm just going to go through all of these. Again, we're running low on time here. So if any of you are interested in any of these committees, or if you have any suggestions, please feel free to put them in the chat as I go along, and we can address those at a later time. So the next suggested committee is the Marketing and Communications, or also the Outreach Committee. So identifying key messages for specific target audiences, maintaining the website, which we do have. So maintaining and updating that as necessary, as also having access to and control of the social media for any upcoming events. This one we already touched on. When we get a mailing list going, this will be the task for the Communications Committee to distribute messages to the mailing list on a regular basis regarding upcoming meetings and events. Partnering with the tourism organizations to increase public awareness and garner more support for our trail networks. Working with the programs work group and the programs committee on planning, advertising, and presenting programs and seminars on specific topics that we decide to promote. Creating consistent signage and identifying how to coordinate acquisition and installation of that signage. So this is one that we already had a couple of people mention some interest on. So I will make sure that this gets shared with everyone so you can take a look at it and see if your name has already been listed. If you want to move from one committee to the next, that's fine, because this is all still in planning. The next committee is the Program Committee. So the Program Committee can identify topics to be discussed at quarterly meetings and special events. So working in conjunction with the Steering Committee on that. Recruiting speakers and panel members with expertise in the specified topics that can present on those. Conducting research, creating conversation starting questions for discussion, and creating materials to post online and share on social media. So working with the Marketing and Communications Committee. The Data and Data Sharing Committee. So identifying where partners or advisors have consistent or inconsistent data standards, sampling methods, and maps. Coordinating discussions to explore reasons for different approaches. Charlie, maybe you can touch on that one a little bit more. I know that's something that you would put in there. Identify opportunities to acquire compatible visitor use technology, and identifying how to export and import data produced by our partners and advisors to create more consistent materials. This includes outreach to external data sharing organizations. And then lastly on there, what we touched on in today's meeting is that aspirational trails planning. So working with Moses there to develop the process to gather input from our partners and advisors for creating these aspirational trails maps and identifying opportunities for partners and advisors to advocate for development of trails, shared use paths, safer intersections, and blueways. And kind of creating this comprehensive communication with all the officials within all of these listed organizations. So that's all that we had. We're coming up close on 11 o'clock, so I don't think we're going to have any time for discussion with this. So Charlie, I don't know if you want to just make sure that this gets shared with everyone to give them adequate time to be able to comment on this, and then throw in there in the chat if any of these kind of speak to you that you know for sure you'd like to be a part of, and then we can kind of design and develop these committees in the next couple of weeks here.
Thank you, Alita. This is a year in which the county is doing a mobility chapter. As Chair Wheeler mentioned, they're looking for input and perspective on what are our priorities. We are invited to play in the game. We've created a mechanism to be prioritizing what we think are the most important trails for us to propose first. We've created this coalition, and thanks to the county staff and the National Park Service for several years of work to build us to this point in having this coalition. A lot of folk have done a lot of good work before we all got here. And folks like Ernie and David have been pushing this rock up this hill for more than 1 decade to get us to this point. And this is the year in which a lot of good things can happen. So we invite your active participation in these committees. Alita is not asking you to sign on for a lifetime. She's asking you to contribute for a while. And that is the first one is the Aspirational Trails Committee, meeting on February 4th. Steering Committee actually meets monthly if people want to engage in shaping the future of this coalition. We welcome your participation. We stick to the hour. We stick to our schedule. We appreciate your joining us and participating. You will hear from us. You will get an invitation to join committees. You will have opportunities to engage with us on a regular basis. And if you have other organizations that you are aware of which would want to be part of this discussion, want to be part of this coalition, we're a welcoming community. As Ann mentioned earlier, in this case, Ann O'Neill, we need to reach out to our marginalized communities. We need to enhance the ability to connect with folks that are not currently part of this conversation. So we're particularly interested in people that you know that care about trails, and you can see them on the Neabsco Greenway every day, but they're not engaged in the organizations that are talking about trails. So we look forward to hearing from you as to where you think there might be some other people who want to come and participate in the discussion. With that, I'm going to suggest that we've done our hour. We've been here long enough to gain some perspective. Thank you to our 2 speakers and to David for introducing them. We appreciate your participation. And I'm going to declare this a success. Invite us all to go home and do the next thing on our to-do list. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.